All right, Dr. Dre, welcome to the Growing Father podcast. Happy to have you. How you doing today?
Hey, I'm good. I'm excited to be here.
Awesome, man. So we've been friends for a while now, and there's a million things that we could talk about today, from fitness to X-Men 97 and Marvel to speaking gigs and writing a book and leadership. But I really want to talk to you a little bit more today about education, parenting, the state of things as you see when it comes to what's going on with our kids, and what they need from both parents and teachers, and how we can help. But before we jump in, I really want to hear a little bit more from you about your journey as an educator. From where did you start thinking, this is what I want to do, this is my calling, and this is what I want to invest in?
So, I have had opportunities to talk about my journey as an educator, and it's usually how I start off my keynotes. So when I get an opportunity to go and speak to different people in different organizations, I used to talk about my why and that story. And it started, believe it or not, when I was in high school. And I guess technically it started before then, because I was a martial artist as a kid, and still am. I guess it's one of those once a martial artist, always a martial artist. I don't train as much as I wish I could, but I still could take somebody out if I needed to. The skills and the knowledge are still there.
So I hear. Yeah.
And so at the age of 12, when I got my first degree black belt, I started teaching, and that was something that my instructor saw in me, and immediately started teaching classes and different things whenever I earned that rank. And then I distinctively remember when I graduated from high school, I was really big into band, and at our end of the year banquet, I walked across the stage because I had already been accepted to UF. I was going to be a microbiology major. The plan was to be an anesthesiologist. And I walked across the stage getting an award, and my band director looked at me and she said, "This guy thinks he's going to be a doctor, but I'm here to tell you he's going to be a band director." And I was like, "Oh, what are you talking about? Okay, where I'm going, why I'm going there. Challenge accepted. That's not going to happen." So fast forward, it's my junior year of college, and I have been doing my microbiology major, but I also did a music education major, because the goal was to do anesthesiology for 10, 11 years. That way 1 year would pay for the 10 years of malpractice insurance. I'll make money for a decade and then potentially retire. And then I might do the teaching thing on the side.
Just for fun.
Yeah, because I wouldn't have to rely on it to make ends meet. I'd already have everything set, so I could do whatever I wanted. And it's get the money and then do your passion.
Gotcha.
And so but at the same time, I was teaching martial arts here locally in Gainesville at a place called World Martial Arts Center. And that was where I met this student, Ronnie Smith. And at the time, I was participating on the circuit. So I was traveling around the world, competing, different things. And my student was like, "Hey, that's something I want to do. I want to be able to earn national championships and world championships and do that." So we were doing private lessons and different things. And he was scoring in the top of his age group, but he was like, I want to be first. What do I need to do to get first place? And so it's like, "Well, bud, in your division, because you've got some really, really good talent out there, in order to get somewhere we've never been, we've got to do something we've never done before." And so we started working on his new flashy move that had never been done. And so his weapon of choice was the bow staff. And which I know what a bow staff is, but for the listeners, for those who don't know, think about the Ninja Turtles. Hopefully everyone's old enough to remember who the Ninja Turtles are. But Donatello, the purple one, had the big stick. And if you don't know, and you still don't know what it is, just imagine a broomstick, like a broom, and just break off the sweepy part, and that's your weapon. And so his move, the one that he came up with, was that he was going to throw it in the air. It's just going to rotate. He's going to spin his body 3 times around, land on one knee, and catch it. So like that was his big flashy move. At the time, nothing like that had ever been done. And we're talking probably 20 years ago. Like if you watch the kids now in competitive martial arts, they're doing all this wild, crazy stuff. Well, he was one of the original pioneers of all that crazy bow staff stuff that's out there. And so worked on it. He was only catching it probably about 60% of the time. Like it's not something that I would have felt comfortable putting out in public, right? And in the circuit, in this particular division, if you drop the weapon, you're disqualified. So like you lose all your points, you don't like get anything for that tournament. So it's really risky to do the high risk moves, but that's kind of the part of it, no risk, no reward. And so we were preparing for the last tournament of the year, and this year was what's called the Diamond Nationals, which is out in Minnesota, St. Paul. And so we were getting ready, and he was like, "Sensei, I want to like break out the move at this tournament." I'm like, "Bud, like this is the last tournament of the year. Like we're chasing points. If you drop this, you won't finish first." And he was going back and forth with another student, like they're just battling for first and second place. I was like, if you do your regular routine and you nail it, like there's a high possibility that you get first. Now, if you did this move, you would absolutely get first. But like this is a risk. And he's like, no, I want to do it. So like I had to get out of the way and let him do his thing. And so he decided he was going to do it. So we get to the tournament and he's going through his routine, and his mom and I are like standing there like close knuckle, like she's just like gripping my hand. And because we've seen the routine thousands of times, so we know when it's coming up. So we get to this section, he throws up the bow, boom, he catches it, nails it. Everybody goes crazy. They've never seen anything like this. Like his mom jumps up, is like hugging me, and she's in tears, and we're super excited. He still had like another 20 seconds left of the routine. So like they're still going. He finishes, he does his salutation, and he leaves the ring. So then he comes like is running over towards us. And so I figured, okay, he's gonna like go hug his mom, like, because like without her, he wouldn't be here. Like, literally and figuratively. And then afterwards we'll like connect and like dap up and everything. And so, but instead he comes and he runs to me and like gives me this huge hug. And I look down at him and he looks up at me and he's got tears in his eyes. And he just looks at me and says, "Thank you, Sensei." And I had one of those moments where it's like 1,000 thoughts go through your mind. So like on one end, I was like, what is he thanking me for? Like he went out there and like he did it, like he had to execute, like, or else this wouldn't happen. But then I also realized that without me there to guide him, to provide that reinforcement, to really emphasize the fundamentals and that repetition, without those pieces there, and honestly, without me there to have taught the fundamentals to get him where he is right now, like he wouldn't have been able to accomplish what at that time was like his lifelong goal, right? I mean, this kid, he was like 10 years old. So like this was his dream. And it was in that moment that I realized that my purpose, my responsibility, my passion, and what I look at too with the maturity lens as my ministry is to teach. And so we flew back from St. Paul that weekend. I went into my academic advisor's office on Monday and I said, "Hey, Mutlu, I am dropping microbiology and I'm just going to stick with the music education major." And mind you, this is in November. And so those who know the collegiate schedule, like in November, classes are basically done. And I was in my last science course, like because I was going to finish my microbiology degree early because I was an international baccalaureate student. So I came in already as a sophomore. And so I was going to finish that degree early and then just stay for the full 4 years to finish my music degree. And she looked at me and she's like, "Are you sure?" And I'm like, "Hey, like if I'm not going to use it, I don't need it. Like I'm good. Like I'm not gonna finish that degree." Which, as a teacher, I'm really glad that I did that, because then I didn't get stuck teaching like AP biology or anything like that outside of the music stuff. But it was that moment, that turning point moment with Ronnie, that really pushed me into being solely focused on education. And stayed at UF, got my bachelor's, stayed and got my master's back to back, and then got a call from my my high school band director, the one who told me I was going to be a band director my last year of my master's. And she's like, hey, what are you doing next year? And I was like, looking for a job. And she said, well, how would you like to come back and teach at your alma mater? I'm about to go and open up a brand new school. And I was like, absolutely. So I was handpicked by my band director to go back and succeed her at the school that really was the reason why I was where I was going to be where I was. So yeah, I know it's a long-winded story.
Yeah.
But I feel like it's significant to really understand.
Yeah.
Like, when you talk about that journey, like had that not happened, I'm a part of a Leadership Florida cohort, and they say it's a but-for moment. If not for that moment, then I don't know where I would be. I'd probably be a doctor making a whole lot more money than I make now, but would not have the impact that I've been able to, or that I believe I've been able to have on the next generation of world changers.
Yeah. There's something about coaching and teaching, right? That you get to share in the success of other people, right? That you get to be excited. I have, with me coaching volleyball, I have a few kids that I coached when they were 12-year-olds. And now I see them playing college and doing this stuff. And even though I know that the part that I played was a small part, right? I don't think that a kid's playing at LSU or, anywhere like that because of the little thing that I taught them when they were 12, that little drill that we did really did it. But it is a small part, right? Like, because as a teacher and as a coach, you get to play a part on how does the kid feel about that particular thing, right? Are you going to be the teacher that makes kids love music and love playing, or the teacher that makes kid never want to touch that thing again, or cause that type of impact that, it just keeps them going? Or maybe it's a little mindset thing, or you just gave them a pleasant experience at that time that made them show up next year again.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so it's pretty cool. I feel, when I see those kind of things, I feel incredibly proud. Right. Even though I know it's like, man, I'm happy this kid's succeeding. And I feel proud that I had a small part to play in that, in that journey.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
And so when you started, you get your first job as a teacher, being band director, how has your focus on the education trail changed? How has it, maybe you thought, I'm going to teach, and then now you're vice principal. How did that trajectory look like for you?
So it was not the traditional pathway. And I feel like you're asking two questions. I'm going to answer it in two separate parts. I'm talking about the journey and then how my perspective has changed.
Okay.
And so my journey, like I said, is different from most people. I taught for 11 years in that same classroom, never intended to leave. The plan actually was to become the secondary supervisor of music from Hillsborough County. So I'm from Tampa, the Tampa area is where I grew up. And I was somewhat being groomed to just take over the job of supervising all the music teachers in the middle schools and the high schools. And that was the plan. I was going to stay at my job for 16 years and then shift over and do that until I decided to retire, and everything would be fine and I'd stay in Tampa. And I'm sure you and many of the listeners have heard the whole adage or the phrase, tell God your plans and he's going to laugh at you. And so in 2019, I was selected as the King High School Teacher of the Year, which actually was the second time because it happened in 2012 as well. And then after I was selected as the King High School Teacher of the Year, I was selected as a top 5 finalist for Hillsborough County, which also, once again, was the second time that had happened. It happened in 2012, and then it happened again in 2019. I was not selected to represent the county in 2012. However, in 2019, I was selected as the Hillsborough County Teacher of the Year. When that happened, my principal, my superintendent, they all came up to me and they're like, hey, listen, you weren't selected to represent Hillsborough. You were selected to represent the state. You're going to go on, you're going to be a finalist. You're going to be selected, and you're going to travel around and share your message. And of course, I'm like, no, that's not going to happen. Like, I'm going to be here. Like, it's whatever. Well, like 3 months later, I was selected as a finalist for the state. And then about 2-3 months after that, I was selected to represent the state as the 2020 Florida Teacher of the Year, which in Florida, that gives you a year sabbatical. So they actually pull you out of the classroom and give you an opportunity to travel the state and do keynote speeches and workshops with other teachers and meet superintendents and kind of go around and learn the lay of the land, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
And you serve as the ambassador for education. It's the Krista McAuliffe ambassador for education for the state of Florida. And so I did that. My goal was to be the first teacher of the year. And so far, like as recorded, this is still the case. We've had 57 teachers of the year in our state. And out of all 57, I'm the only one to travel to all 67 counties and 7 at-large districts in our state to meet with every teacher of the year, to meet most of the superintendents in the counties,
Mm-hmm.
and different things, and learn about what our state has, and then the diversity, the vast diversity
Mm-hmm.
in the state of Florida. But did that, and then we know a little something happened on March 13th, 2020, that caused this.
Can't think of anything.
Yeah, you know, there's a little something that caused everything to shut down. And when you're the teacher of the year for the state of Florida, you become really a ward of the state. You are employed by the state,
Mm-hmm.
and you're at the direction of really the governor. And so when Governor DeSantis shut everything down and he stopped travel for all state agents. So fortunately for me, I finished my last county. Like we had a hard time getting in touch with one county, and finally got in touch with him, came and went and observed his classroom, got a chance to share all the great things he was doing on March 4th. So literally the
That's
week
awesome.
before March 13th, the week before everything just went crazy, I got to my last district. And so then we were just sitting around, and the commissioner at the time, who I'd been able to develop a really great relationship with, said, hey, you know, I've been talking to you as you've been going through your journey that
Mm-hmm.
I'd potentially have an opportunity for you, because I do believe that the way you communicate, the way you handle yourself, your poise, just how educated you are will provide some opportunity for you to really make a difference. And kind of my platform, along with wanting to impact the next generation of world changers, was that it was important that representation matters. And when I was asked the why you question for teacher of the year, why should you be selected? I said it's important that the lowest performing demographic in our state, which unfortunately is the African American male when we look at academics, needs to see someone who looks like them in a position that's considered successful, so that they understand that people who look like them can value education, can earn an education, can do great things in education, and that sports aren't the only way. And I say that as a former athlete, and I would argue that I'm still a current athlete. I was actually working out in the gym in Daytona, and the gym owner for that gym came up to me and goes, "Man, you're a real athlete." I'm like, "You're working out, man." Just like, I appreciate it though. I appreciate the.
You know, feels good. You know what's funny? Because you say that, so you know that we got a dog recently, and I've been working with this dog all the time. And I was walking with him the other day, and these guys on the garbage truck stopped by and said, "Hey, are you a dog trainer?" And I was like, well, not officially, but yes.
I do it on this side.
Yeah, I could be if I wanted to, but, right. Here we are.
Exactly. And so going back to the commissioner, he was like, hey, there's this opportunity. YU representation is important. And he said, your presence will have an impact across the state if you were in this position. And so went back and forth. And in the back of my head, I hear my principal and my superintendent once again saying, you're going to get selected, you're going to be there, and then you're not coming back. And so something that I shared with the commissioner was like, I believe you, and I believe I believe in you, and I know where you are, like where your mentality is. I understand what your belief system is, and I align with that. And so as long as you're here, and he said, I'm going to give you every opportunity that you need to voice your opinion, to be able to share what you think is right and understand the direction. And I'm also going to communicate with you why this is the direction we're going in. But then once that happens, you've got to be fully on board with what's happening, and knowing that you had the opportunity to share and that we're making some of those decisions together, especially being the one most recently removed from the classroom in this educational environment, which really is largely political. And so learning to navigate that was very interesting as well. Very thankful for that opportunity. But I took him up on it. I said, okay, all right, let's do it. And so then went and worked for the Department of Education for 2.5 years. And during that time, I served on the executive staff. I was the executive director for school choice for 1.5 years, which was an incredible experience, really learning about the ins and outs and what school choice is supposed to be. And you know how it is with anything, like you have a system that's created with a certain purpose, and then things happen and that purpose kind of gets meshed a little bit along the way. But with the right leadership, things are steered back in that correct direction. So just things that 1.5 years of getting all of the choice schools through the COVID pandemic, and where we came on the outside of that, making sure they had the resources, but then the direction we were heading in, I was very proud of. Just increased communication, just different. It was a really great time. But served in that role for about 1.5 years, and then went to serve as the executive director for the Bureau of School Improvement, which is a direct contact and impact with those schools that are underperforming, which in our state, a large population of those schools are African-American population. So really appreciate getting to go in. We were working with some school districts very specifically, where we're sitting down with superintendents weekly about, hey, how are we making these changes? Getting to see what some other schools were doing really well around the state. And that was a really, really awesome passion project. And then there were some shifts and some things, and the commissioner left, and I was like, okay, you know what, now I see kind of the direction that things are going right now, and I don't necessarily agree with all of them. And something I talked to my commissioner about was that at any point in time when I don't feel as though the department is reflecting my values as an educator, like I have no problem going back to the classroom. Like I didn't leave the classroom because I didn't want to teach anymore.
Yeah.
I left because you said I would get an opportunity to have a state and a national impact. And so really got a chance to do some really cool things, but it was time for me to get back to the local level. So from there, an opportunity opened up in Gainesville. And so I moved back to serve at the district level, really doing work. And I know right now in our state, equity is a 4-letter word in education, but I think a lot of that is because people don't know how to define equity. It's been made to be a boogeyman. Everybody wants equity. They just don't know that it's called equity. And the way I define equity, especially as it relates to education, is it's providing everyone with a unique and individualized experience tailored to their specific assets and variabilities. We use terms like differentiation, we use accommodations. Those are all forms of equity. When we choose our doctor, and people would say, I think people would argue as well that school choice is a form of equity, because we don't just go to the doctor that we have to go to because that's who our insurance told us to go to. Now we have options. And there's sometimes those options are a little bit more limited depending on who your insurance provider is.
Yeah.
But we can still choose that if we have a bad experience with one doctor, we're going somewhere else because that doctor can't meet my needs. That is what equity is, that ability to choose, but it's also the action of providing that tailored experience based off of what you need. If I come in with an arm issue, I don't want you to treat my leg. I want you to treat my arm.
Or I don't want you to tell me what treatment was for the other guy, right? Like I'm going to do this with you because this is what worked with the other guy. The other guy came with leg pain. I gave him this pill and he's fine. So I don't care if it doesn't work for you. I'm going to continue giving you the leg pain medication. And if it doesn't work for you, well, that is your problem, you know?
Right. Yes. That is the antithesis of equity. And so that led me back to Gainesville, like I said. And then from there, I'm now in the role of assistant principal. And so when we talk about that perspective, the second part of your question, that was the journey. The second part of the question, I would argue that my perspective hasn't changed since I was in the classroom. And something I promised myself when I left the classroom is that I would never forget what it's like to be a teacher. And the majority of my decisions are based off of how would the teachers respond? How would the teachers handle this? How would I respond if I were in the classroom? But I also make sure that my bottom line, I am unapologetic about my bottom line as an educator, and that is doing what's best for students. I like to say I'm unapologetically student-centered, goal-oriented, and data-driven, in that order. And I think it's important to be explicit about that, because I am not going to make adults comfortable at the expense of students. And so that guiding principle for me has been what has led my decision making. And that is no different than the way that I developed my curriculum, the way that I instructed, the way that I provide opportunities and experiences for my students in the classroom.
One of the things that you mentioned was about how generally speaking, the African American males tend to perform like is the lowest performing group in the state. And I imagine that there are several reasons for that, right? Like, because I think the interesting thing with social media and the ability of everybody giving information is that everything is boiled down to one thing, right? Like, so everybody knows what the single problem of every issue is, and everybody knows how to fix it, and everything is super easy. This is all you need to do. Right. We see that in the fitness community all the time. Oh, the problem is sugar. That's the only problem. The problem is fat. That's the only problem. The only problem is that you do cardio too, whatever it is, because people have lost a lot of the skills to have a multifaceted conversation where multiple things can be true at once.
Right.
Right. Like I can, we've talked about this, right? Like I can say that, listen, yeah, you get robbed. The person that robbed you is wrong. You also shouldn't be flashing $100 bills, at night in New Orleans.
Right. Both are true.
Yeah, both of those things are true. But what are some of the main things that you've seen over the past, especially the past few years, that it has resonated with you as far as, man, if we could address these things, this community would do a lot better?
Yeah, so this is somewhat of a loaded question when we start talking about education, because a lot of the issues that we have right now, specifically as it relates to ethnicity specific deficiencies and differences, and I think words matter. And I'm going to pause there for a moment. Say, you will hear me when we start talking about things like this, which I'm very passionate about. But you'll hear me discuss and use the term ethnicity more than I use the term race, because words also divide us. And we can't say we're all the human race, but then also use that term to separate differences, biological differences, ethnic differences, cultural differences. And so I choose to use the term ethnicity, and there are different biology researches and different things like that where it is backed by research and data that would support my use of the words in this way. But if you and I are different ethnicities, we have different, really our origin is the same, but just through time and evolution and all those things.
We've been through different places.
Correct. But like if I cut my arm off and you cut your arm off, like we're gonna bleed the same way. We have the same physical things in there. The physiology itself, like bone density and all that stuff, might be a little bit different, but the pieces are the same.
Yeah.
And so and when we approach this, having that unifying factor that connects us all, it also emphasizes the fact that we are all humans. And so we go back to what happened during the time of enslavement, and which people who look like me were treated like property, not people. We dehumanize that element. It is because of that time period that we are where we are in education. So it's not just a matter of how do we fix it right now. We're talking about generational injustices and things that happened 200, 300 years ago that have resulted in the deficit of people who look like me. Now, I say that to not eliminate the fact that there are individuals who have been able to develop generational wealth, who look like me and have been able to give those opportunities. But when we look at statistically the numerical differences of people who look like me, versus the people who look like you even, and the people who are like, if we're not white passing, the people who are white and Caucasian, particularly in this country, of that wealth disparity, it is a significant difference when you look at the 1%, right? And that stems from a number of things. And we talked about the generational injustices. We look back at desegregation. And I would argue, and this is, and you know me, I love everybody. My wife is Caucasian. It is, I was raised in a house of acceptance, not tolerance. And there's a significant difference there, to where you value the differences and the uniquenesses that everybody brings, not just acknowledge and tolerate. And so when I look historically back, though,
you mean I don't have to pretend that you're a white guy anymore?
Hey, you can stop. You can stop. It's okay. It's all right. And I mean, just talking about that, pretending you're a white guy. Like, I grew up being teased because I talked white, and because we valued education, and that was a priority. And my argument to that is, who determined that white is the standard? Like, that's the acceptable standard that we all should live up to. But it's because that those are the individuals who we see in positions of authority, positions of wealth, positions that we determine are successful. And you'll notice I don't use that word very much, because I think we should be pursuing the best version of ourselves. And what's successful for me is not what's successful for other people. I have 3 doctoral degrees. That is something I consider successful. There are people who getting just the high school diploma, that's their version of success, and that's as far as they want to go. And I honor that, and I value that. And what's my next question for them is, what's next? How are we going to utilize that high school diploma to like really help you pursue your dreams? But when we look back at that time of desegregation, and we look at what happened educationally, it wasn't a unifying of 2 different worlds and 2 different concepts and 2 different people. It was an attempt to get the Black student community to assimilate to the white system. And because during that time, they weren't also desegregating Black teachers. They weren't bringing Black teachers into the schools. They weren't bringing Black administrators into the schools. The majority of those 2 populations lost their jobs and had to figure out what they were going to do next. It wasn't an integration of the African-American curriculum that was being used to where those Black students were learning about themselves and who they were and the history in America, which we talk about African-American history. African-American history is American history. There is no separation. You can't have America without talking about the contributions and the role that Black people played, that the people from Africa played in the development of this country. And so there's an argument, and I would also argue that when we look at this deficit and the gap between the African-American population as a whole to the Anglo-European population as a whole, because we have to remember that there are still white students who are not performing well, who are underperforming. But the majority, the vast majority, and the difference between those 2 populations is staggering. But when we look at that, it's desegregation is probably the single.
Let me ask you a question about that. Okay. Because I would like to understand this. When you say that, are you saying that like in a percentage, so if you have 100, white kids, they are, maybe you have 30% of them doing very poor and 70% of them doing okay or better, versus if you compare to African-American kids, maybe 60% of them are doing very poor and 40% of them are doing okay or better. Is that what you mean by that?
That's 100% accurate. Yeah. And our state data specifically, and just the national data across the board acknowledges that. So some numbers from a couple of years ago, and I haven't looked at these yet in a while because I have been school focused, singular campus focused, and not statewide focused as much as I used to be. But at one point in time in our county specifically, we had the largest deficit between our white student performance and our African-American student performance. And our white student performance was like 86%. So 86% of our students who were white were considered proficient in math, reading, science, and social studies, because those are what the metrics are across the nation that we are obligated to test.
Uh-huh.
At that time that we had 86% of our white students, 24% of the Black students were proficient. So that here in Alachua County. So, and that is, while not as staggering, like not as big of a gap around the nation, it is still a very large gap.
Yeah.
And so that is that you hit the nail right on the head with that.
And it becomes a, you know, when you talk about representation and being able to see yourself in those roles, right? That becomes a really big deal, because if everybody, I was watching this thing the other day, this guy was talking about that the biggest indicator of your success is the people that you're around.
Yes.
Right. Yep. And so if if when you're in class and you get a C and you're the dumbass in the class, you're going to be pushed to do a little better.
Right.
But if when you get a C, you're the genius in the class,
you don't have to work harder.
It's going to be very hard. Like, hey, I finished high school. I'm the smartest guy in my neighborhood. I'm the smartest guy in my family. I'm the smartest guy in my class. You create some real deficit of expectation, right? Because then, hey, if I'm in the 30% instead of the 24%, how many people are there to tell me that I can do better?
Right. Absolutely. And I mean, you think about too, just that C to the using your metric that you just said, you get that C. A lot of times you'll have educators who curve the score. So now that C becomes the A. So now we're even creating even more of that deficit mentality, because we're valuing and honoring that work because it was the best in the class, not because it met the expectation of the rubric. So that's a whole other conversation that we can dig into. But to wrap up just the answer to your previous question, I would argue that desegregation is probably the single greatest factor that led to this deficit than anything that we've done in this country, because we went from creating thriving Black communities to having this integration that really is an assimilation without representation. And so the Black students are now coming in and learning about all of the white accolades, but never learning about the Black accolades. And that's why there has been this recent push and this recent movement to really get Black figures to the forefront, and for us to learn about the people we never learned about. I mean, if you go back and ask people from our generation, who are the Black people that you learned about in school, the majority of the people will tell you Martin Luther King, Rosa Parks. Maybe you learned about Frederick Douglass. Maybe W.E.B. Du Bois. Maybe
it was passed on real quick.
Right. I mean, I might have heard of Madam C.J. Walker. Like, that name sounds familiar. But yes, Jackie Robinson, though. We all learned about Jackie Robinson. Why? Because he's an athlete. And that's how things get steered. And then when we look at what's going on with sports, the National Football League and the National Basketball Association would not exist without African Americans. It wouldn't. We know this. And if you really think about it and you look at the combine and different things like that, it really is a modern day auction block. And so you look at how they've taken a system and it's just shifted a little bit into how they're looking at things. And then you look at, what are we emphasizing for our Black students? Well, if you are not going into sports, if you're not doing some form of entertainment, what are the options? And let's really think about, even though we now live in the TikTok era where people can make a lot of money off social media, which is awesome. And I would love to somehow tap into that eventually sometime in my life. But really, I'm not wired that way. I'm just not wired like it's the percent of people who are able to capitalize on those things is not something that just is open to the general public. But this is who we're idolizing. These are the things that we're putting up on a pedestal. And so this is what our students are trying to do. Well, I don't need a degree in order to become a TikTok enthusiast. I don't need a degree to become a YouTuber.
Mm-hmm.
I can just do those things. And so this is where we start to pull away from the importance of making sure that we have what was called the 3 R's: reading, writing, and arithmetic.
Mm-hmm.
Those are still important in today's society. It just looks a little bit different. And so we look at it, and you can bundle all that into one word: literacy. And are we literate? Not just and that doesn't just mean I can read words
Mm-hmm.
and comprehend. You have math literacy, music literacy, social literacy,
Mm-hmm.
emotional intelligence, all those things. Am I a literate individual who is able and capable of being a global citizen? And so, yeah, that is, as the world told by Dre, that would be what I would identify as really the root cause
Mm-hmm.
for where we are now. It's not just hey, if we throw more money at it, because we have federal programs that provide money to schools, or Title I and all those other kind of things, Title IV, Title II. Like, there's so many different ways that we can get money that are provided to areas of poverty. But we know that as much as ethnicity is not an indicator of aptitude or potential, mm-hmm. like just because you're Black doesn't mean you're going to fail school. And I mean, obviously, I'm Black and I didn't fail school. Like there are a lot of Black individuals who don't fail school. However, in the regions that have high populations of African American individuals, mm-hmm. their schools and their resources and the areas that are a result of redlining and other legal forms of segregation that are still happening don't receive the same priorities mm-hmm. as the more affluent schools that have the resources that are able to. I mean, you look at it, there's one of the biggest things I hate is whenever people say, oh, well, this school has better parent participation than this school. And so this is a top school community because the parents are so invested. Well, just because parents don't show up at this school that's predominantly Black doesn't mean the parents aren't invested. Those parents are most likely having to work nights, so they're not available during the day. Mm-hmm. They're having to do jobs, odd-end jobs, 2-3 jobs a day that keep them priority so that they can get food on the table. Whereas this affluent job, or the affluent schools where they've got stay-at-home moms who can be involved, whose priority is to, or stay-at-home dads. I want to make sure that we're not exclusive. that they get the opportunity to be able to serve on the PTSA and to go in and create banners and school boards and do all those things. Yeah, that's great. But that's because they've been afforded that opportunity and they've worked hard to get there and to be able to do that. Yes. But the families who were just trying to make ends meet didn't get that same opportunity. Mm-hmm. And so that the likelihood that their child is going to have those same supports and be able to do that are different. So now that school looks like it's suffering and it doesn't have the same parent investment, but that's because they just physically cannot do it. And we don't honor that. We don't honor that these parents are still, both parents that I gave you in those examples are doing the best that they can to support their child.
Absolutely.
Right. But just the circumstances are different. And so how do we, as administrators and as the people who have decision-making authority, how do we provide opportunities then to meet those individuals where they are? And that's the big piece. So there's not just one factor, but I do think that it stems from that time period that has just over decades of time has just exacerbated what then the problem started there, and it's just gotten exponentially worse over time.
Yeah. And one thing that I wanted to get your take on it too, because I keep hearing, through different things about, teachers, the kids should not know anything about your life. You're there to teach math, which I find an impossible concept, right? Because we don't seem to have a problem with a teacher sharing any of our life, any of their life, as long as we agree with them, right? Like we don't necessarily have a problem with a teacher saying, "Oh, this weekend I went hiking with my husband," right? But we have a real problem if it starts going into other areas. It's like, no, please just teach my kids. Don't share any of that stuff. what do you think is it's the role of school when it comes to, hey, here's half of what, here's a world of academics. I want my kid to go to school, to learn to read, to write, to do math, to learn about history. And how far is the role of school and educators there on the moral side and growing more of a personality more than just, hey, kid, you know what 2 + 2 is? Get out.
Yeah, I think the data would suggest that the most effective teachers are those who build relationships.
Mm-hmm.
And so a phrase that we use in education a lot is Maslow's before Bloom. So we talk about Maslow's hierarchy of needs,
Mm-hmm.
and that the very basic needs have to be met before you can do anything else. And then in Bloom's taxonomy, we talk about just the different phases of cognitive understanding and knowledge and comprehension. And the goal is self-actualization. And we can't even get to the cognitive processes part of
Mm-hmm.
it if a student comes to school hungry. We can't even get to learning what 2 + 2 is if the student is worried about being safe and in an environment in which they're protected. So it is, I would argue that it is impossible for a teacher to be able to teach a student efficiently without developing some form of relationship, in which a relationship is something that is transactional. And it is, in order to develop respect, the equation that I like to use, the formula is respect, or relationship plus rapport equals respect.
Mm-hmm.
And so while a relationship is transactional, you can have a one-way relationship. And this is where people tend to overuse that word, because relationship with a lack of rapport is still meaningless. And the example I'll use is when I was selected as teacher of the year, it happened at like 9 o'clock on a Thursday, and Thursday, July 19th, actually, specifically. And when I looked at my phone at 9:05, I had hundreds of friend requests on Facebook. People who wanted to follow my journey, they wanted to know who I was, all those kind of things. Those people got to follow and learn who I was and what I was doing from there on. And so a lot of them are still on my friends list, but I had no idea who they were. So they were in relationship with me because they knew all about me. Then we would meet in person and they say, hey, you don't know me, but we're Facebook friends. And so then I would take that opportunity to develop a rapport. Now I'm going to let's talk, and like let's give you the opportunity to put some meaning behind this name, and like let me get to know you. Let me find out who you are, what are the things you enjoy, why do you even care about what I'm doing, and find those connecting links. Now we're developing a rapport. So now that relationship has meaning because of the rapport, which now has resulted in respect. Teachers are humans, and it's important for students to know that teachers are humans, because then they understand that they can also be humans, and we're held to that expectation. And this is also why I don't know that I agree with the way that we approach providing support, I'll say, for our educational population, because we hold them to this significant standard because they are the most noble, the most impactful profession that exists across the board.
That's why we pay them so much, Dre.
Well, and that's where I'm going. That's where I'm going with this, baby. It is, we hold them to this standard, but then we don't provide the resources and the respect, at least in this country, that they are owed, that they are due. When you look at European countries specifically, to where their teachers are paid like they're medical professionals, and they're given the opportunity to teach and to be autonomous and to do what's best for their students, it is a different perspective. They tell you, if you want to know what a society values or what people value, look at where they put their money, look at where they put their resources. And so to say that you want a teacher just to go in and teach is like telling, or like whenever they said to LeBron, just go dribble. Well, LeBron James is much bigger than an athlete. He's much bigger. And this is why, while I don't hero worship, like it's athletes are athletes to me. I don't agree with them getting paid as much as they get paid, especially, this may just be the bias of me being an educator, but I also don't believe that their experience, like them serving as an athlete, gives them any more authority politically
Mm-hmm.
or in life than anybody else. So why should I listen to them any more than I would listen to my friend down the street,
Mm-hmm.
right? But they have been afforded that opportunity and that platform that now
Mm-hmm.
they are used in such a way. And so we hold teachers to the standard even above them, but yet they're getting all this money and we're listening to that voice
Mm-hmm.
because teachers have the most valuable resource. We are the ones who utilize and grow the most valuable resource
Mm-hmm.
in the world. In the world. These are the next generation of world changers. And so when we tell them just shut up and teach, well, we're not creating automatons. We are
Mm-hmm.
creating quite literally the next generation of world changers. We are creating people. And so when people would ask me, what's it like being the music teacher of the year? I remind them, I'm not the music teacher of the year. I'm the teacher of the
Uh-huh.
year. It's just that music is my modality. And I use music to create better humans, to
Mm-hmm.
give them an opportunity to be a contributing member of society. How am I doing that? Well, in music, you're teaching leadership skills, you're teaching communication skills, you're teaching organizational skills, while also improving the cognitive ability for them to process information at increasingly higher speeds, to
Mm-hmm.
do planning, to have a stronger working memory. So when there are so many benefits to music specifically. I'm not just teaching a kid to play
Mm-hmm.
an instrument. I'm teaching them to be a positive contributing member to society. And you also do that in math. You also do that
Mm-hmm.
in reading. You also do that in social studies. You do that in every curriculum. And the most impactful teachers are the ones who bring a part of themselves into the classroom.
Mm-hmm.
And there aren't teachers, while it tries to be painted this way, there are no teachers who are going into a classroom and saying, students, you need to be homosexual because I'm homosexual.
Mm-hmm.
That's it's not happening.
I hope not.
You don't even have to hope, bud. Like it's not happening.
Uh-huh.
I'm here to tell you, as someone who's in a school every day,
Yeah.
it's not happening. Who's been in multiple schools, it's not
Uh-huh.
happening. And in the same way that you walk into a classroom in which there is a heterosexual serial family with mom, dad, and the white picket fence, right? There's
Mm-hmm.
pictures of those. A picture of a homosexual family, or it could also be there, and
Yeah.
that is what is representative of our society today. Having this persecution of individuals who live a lifestyle differently
Mm-hmm.
than what the people in positions of authority lead is very dangerous.
Mm-hmm.
It's very dangerous in many, many ways, because now, in the same way that we talked about the importance of representation for the African American community, we need representation for the students who don't look and think like the individual standing in front of them. And it's that civil discourse that creates critical thinkers.
Mm-hmm.
I push back more than probably anybody that I know on things, because if it doesn't make sense, I want to know why.
Uh-huh.
Don't just tell me we're doing this because I said so. Like, I grew up in that household and I get it. And that was how I was raised, because that is what my parents knew it would take in order for me to survive as a Black person in America.
Mm-hmm.
There's a difference. And when students and children are growing up, they should do things that their parents say because they said so, because it's coming from an area of experience.
Mm-hmm.
For me, the way I'm choosing to raise Aaliyah, you respond and you do what I say when I say it, how I said it, because I said it. However, I will also give you the reason why we're doing
Mm-hmm.
it, so that you understand that eventually you're going to develop that understanding that dad's telling me to do this. There's a reason behind it. And I know that he's not going to ask me to do something that
Mm-hmm.
isn't beneficial for me. As kids, our generation had to trust that was going to be the outcome without the why. Because if we
Mm-hmm.
said why, like there's a shoe coming at me, I'm getting slapped, like something, because you don't question authority.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really funny because I question authority all the time, and
Yeah.
but
It's working out just fine.
but that's also because I was raised to be that critical thinker. In
Uh-huh.
school, I had a lot of really great scholastic and academic opportunities that said, hey, question things, know the reason behind things.
Yeah, there's I heard this a long time ago, and it has shaped a little bit the way that I think about that, which is
Uh-huh.
Rules are for children, and principles are for as you mature. So
Okay, I
like
like that.
if we think on the scale, right?
Yeah.
When you have a baby and they try to go get something to put in their mouth, you're just like, nope. And you take it away. You can't put that in your mouth. Right.
Yeah.
As they grow, you start going like, hey, might not be a good idea. Like, they start understanding that, soft looking circles may not be the best thing for you to, but that as a rule, right? When if you have employees, for example, or people that you're working with, the more immature they are, and I'm going to use immature instead
Sure.
of dumber sometimes.
Yeah.
You say, hey, you got to be here, and this is what you got to do. But the more mature somebody is, you start being able to tell them more of the why and the how, and giving them more freedom to make their own decisions. Mm-hmm. Right? When you tell your daughter to, hey, when you come into the house after school, I don't want you to leave the house.
Yeah.
You don't mean that no matter what, if the house is on fire, don't leave the house, right? Like, and you start being able to develop those more principled things, right? Those more principled perspectives. Hey, I need to listen, but you don't get to that. Well, president told me to do this, I guess. Well, I guess I got to do it. That's what they said, right? And so I think that that's the important thing, is that there's a time that you have to just trust somebody, right? There's a time, hey, I don't know, like we saw that, even being abused at times during the pandemic, for example. Hey, I don't know anything what's going on. You tell me, that's what I'm going to do.
Yeah.
And when you abuse that, right, when you have a teacher or a parent, then you start saying, wait a minute. It sounds like bullshit to me, right? And you start seeing, and you start losing that privilege of authority versus, I'm starting to see that the things that this person says really carries weight in other areas, right? Mm-hmm. My mom used to say often, it's like, hey, when you hear a kid saying like, I don't have to listen to you because you're not my mom and dad. It's like, hey, sometimes somebody yells at you, watch out for the car. It doesn't matter if it's your mom and dad. It just matters if the thing is true or not. Yeah. Right. But sometimes there are times in life that you need that trust. And I think is incredibly important when I look back in my life in different relationships that I had with teachers, and teachers that spoke into my life, and teachers that gave me some guidance, that I had a little bit of a relationship, that I believed that they cared about me more than just, did you get an A or not? I believe they wanted me to succeed, but I find it impossible to draw this line of, hey man, shut up and teach. All right. Like, your kid is obviously having some issue. That's not your problem, right? Your kid's obviously having a mental breakdown on this math test, but hey, he must just be the math, right? He must just been stumped by this question. And it's, but I also, as a dad, I also see take my role incredibly seriously, that I want to know what teachers are talking, and what kind of conversations are happening in the classroom.
Sure.
But not just so I can be like, oh, that teacher should not have said that, but so, hey, this is how I see it. And then if eventually a teacher has more rapport with you than me, then I feel like that's a bit of my fault, right? That I didn't, when you saw a teacher doing something, you thought that's cool. And, that's partially my fault there for not, living out what I'm all about enough.
Well, but you're also different, Felipe, in that you take responsibility and you take ownership. That's the key there. It's ownership of what's happening. Not there. I would argue that the majority of people who have issues with what's happening in education don't take ownership of their role and their responsibility as the caretaker. Your parents should be, as I said, should be a child's first teacher.
Mm-hmm.
And they should develop that. And the children should want to come back to their parents to learn. If they are not, it is 100% the fault of the parent, not of the child,
mm-hmm.
and not of the teacher who is trying to create that relationship, exactly what you just said, who's
mm-hmm.
trying to build that rapport so that they can be efficient in what they're supposed to be doing, which is teaching.
Do you find that today that's becoming more prevalent in that parents are handing off more, or you find that it has been like that for a long time? And how does a teacher handle that, right? Like, how do you handle when a kid's not, it's not behaving or it's not performing and you have no feedback and no help from the parent? How does the teacher can have any impact there when there's no backstop at home?
Yeah, so to that point, it is not a teacher's responsibility
mm-hmm.
to teach a parent how to parent. However, it is a teacher's responsibility to educate parents just like we educate children.
Mm.
And it goes back to the relationship and the rapport piece. Because as I'm developing a relationship and a rapport with the student, I should also be developing a relationship and a rapport with the parent. And that's one of the great things about my position that I had as a band director. We had a band booster organization. So I created parent advocates who would go out and advocate for me. So if my students weren't going home and saying positive things, we had parents that were also blasting positive things, but provided opportunities for those parents to come in and to become a part of the community as well. So I engaged with the parents often and really got to know who they were. So then that way, whenever I said, hey, parents, this is something we should consider, they're taking those things into account. They're learning about those things. They're listening, and they're becoming better advocates for their students through that educational opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
And most of the time, whenever there is a disconnect or a failure, or parents think poorly about a teacher, it's because that teacher hasn't communicated with the parent and hasn't attempted to build a relationship. Because I don't know of any parent who's been like, man, that teacher who has taken the time to tell me what my student is doing well, or to tell me what they're doing poorly, and to communicate and show that they are taking ownership and that they're investing in my child, is an absolutely awful teacher. I've yet to see that.
Mm-hmm.
However, my child comes home with a D on a report card. One of the first things a parent will say, well, I didn't know they were doing poorly in that class. No one ever told me.
Mm-hmm.
What am I supposed to do if I don't know anything? And so we can't approach situations assuming that a parent's not going to be involved, because they have priorities. They have additional priorities. When a student is at school, they expect their child to learn.
Mm-hmm.
And so the way that we honor that is by communicating and making sure that we take it upon ourselves to educate. And I guess I look at that word in all things. Like even right now, like we are educating each other as we're having this conversation. Mm-hmm. Every opportunity to communicate with someone is an education. And if we looked at it that way, that we're teaching someone something about ourselves every time we communicate, I think people would look at the way they do things differently. Like I'll be the first to say that my face says everything. But the thing is, like, I don't care. Like, yeah, you said something stupid, so I'm looking at you in a stupid way. And if that makes you feel some kind of way, then maybe you should go back and evaluate what you just said, because it didn't make sense. But like, I'm not just gonna sit there and take it and just be like
okay,
no, like you said,
yes, right, ma'am, your child's an angel.
No, your child is not like. How are you're condoning this action? And so, but not everybody's that way. Not everybody's that way.
Yeah. I mean, it's definitely difficult, like that was, so when I first moved to the US, because I was stereotyped from Brazil, that I had a couple schools that wanted me to go teach soccer, coach soccer, even though I am awful at it and have no idea how to coach. And I remember one of the first things the guy, when I was sitting across the room in this interview with this guy from the school, hey, we want you to come coach soccer and volleyball for us. However, and I didn't know how the system worked. They're like, man, it's awful to just coach because you barely make no money for coaching. Right. But if you're a teacher, then you're good. And I said, all right, great. I said, I have an education to be a PE teacher. They're like, well, that's taken, but you could teach math. I was like, what the shit? How no, I cannot.
No, I can teach PE.
Yeah, I can teach PE. I know how to do that. So no, but we want you to coach. So we're going to, shoehorn you in this position here. But one of the things that discouraged me from pursuing that path when I first moved here, one, the money, right? I was like, man, it's going to be very hard for me for the goals that we had of my wife staying at home with the kids. It's going to be very hard for me as the single provider for my family to live on this. And I had been around long enough to be like, I don't feel like being treated like this. Like, I don't feel like being treated as all the responsibility, none of the authority, right? I have all the responsibility to get your kid to do everything. But every time I say anything, it's like, well, you don't talk to my kid like this. You don't say this to my kid. You don't. It's like, okay, well, that sounds like all the authority, none of the, all of the responsibility, none of the authority. So if your kid turns out great, it was all you. If your kid turns out shit, it was all me.
It's your fault. Yeah.
If your kid gets all A's, it's because you are so dedicated and education is first thing in your house because your kids go to school. Your kids get A's. But when your kids are not doing well, then it's all me in there, right? And so
you're right.
I see this with our kids that, there seems to be a very big gap at a lot of times between how parents are expecting, what is the role that parents are expecting teachers to fulfill, right? Like, and what is the actual authority that those parents want to, hey, teach my kid and help my kid be good, but also don't share anything about your life or don't give them any, which is impossible. If I'm a coach, I'm like you're saying that we're always educating in interactions. It's impossible for me to be a coach and you not get any of whatever it is that I'm putting out, if I'm slimy and, I'm always acting in a weird way, it's going to be hard for you to not get that.
Yeah.
And when you're dealing with kids, if I'm coaching any kind of sports and I'm telling my kids like, well, if you have the opportunity to cheat. Right?
Yeah.
But, it's going to be hard for kids to not get that. And to the same degree, what are the things, what are the lines? So I'm fascinated. Like I was telling you the other day, we're considering homeschooling for next year because I really enjoy teaching. I love teaching my kids. Mm-hmm. It's something I have always enjoyed. And if tomorrow, things changed, I'll be excited to. Hey, I've told you, one of the things that is my dream one day is to open a school and to have a very like entrepreneurial minded school for kids and teaching kids how to kind of succeed in that fashion. But man, you guys have a tough job. There's no question about it. There's no question about it. What is, for people that see our conversation, mm-hmm. what is something that you would like parents to understand about teachers, and what is something that you would like parents to see that they can do to help their kids be successful in school?
I think it goes back to what I said earlier, and that's we're humans. Teachers are humans. Teachers are people who are in a profession that they are attempting to make the world a better place.
Mm-hmm.
So don't treat them like non-human, like they're second-class citizens, or like just open your mouth, communicate. Like it literally is that easy. It's that easy. And just know that we're in this together. And the majority of teachers out there are not trying to indoctrinate. I mean, that's a word that keeps getting thrown around. Like they're just trying to share their passion, not push their passion, but share their passion with the next generation. Like they all had a teacher who made an impact on them that made them want to be a teacher. And something I tell a lot of people who I get a chance to connect with is that everybody remembers their favorite teacher. Everybody also remembers their least favorite teacher. The question is, who made a bigger impact? And the people who go into education, their favorite teacher made a bigger impact. The people who hate education, their worst teacher made a better impact. And so the better teachers, our goal is to be that teacher who makes the positive impact so great that the outcome is much stronger than whatever the worst teacher is capable of. And so if we were able to generate more of the better teacher, then that will elevate educational experience as a whole. But we can't do it by ourselves. There's got to be a collaboration. It really does take a village to raise a child, and your areas in which you have better communication and more collaboration and more empathy, because I collaborate just as well with my families from the low income, high poverty schools, because I choose to communicate. And whenever I need those parents there, they come in, and I create opportunities for them to feel a part of that community. And so we are just as effective as the affluent school that I work in which the parents are there voluntarily, because you can also super saturate a school with parent assistance when it's not needed.
Oh, I can imagine. I can absolutely imagine that.
So that's a part of it too.
Well, dude, thank you so much for your time. The first guest on our podcast. I appreciate it. Wish you the best of luck, and glad that you guys have the new house. The new office is looking sweet.
Thank you.
Hey, before you go though, have you seen this is the only Marvel thing that I'll talk about in this, okay? Have you seen the thing floating around? And I don't know how true it is at all, but I've seen several times.
Okay.
That they got Ryan Gosling to be the next Black Panther.
Oh my God, Black Panther! Yes, I've seen it. But I have also seen something that seems a little bit more true, that they may be casting him for Ghost Rider. But there's no way Kevin Feige would allow.
Oh my God! I was like, I can see when I saw that. I was like, God, I wish I was there to see Dre's face the first time that he saw this.
Dude, yeah.
All right, man. Well, thank you so much. Have a great day, and I'll talk to you soon.
Absolutely.
All right.